Welcome to another exciting edition of Near Mint Comic Radio, your local comic shop shrunk down, gamma irradiated, sworn to protect a world that fears and hates it, and aired live every week only on the Non-Productive Network, the only place that would have us. I'm your host, Frank, joined in studio, as always, by Pete. On Near Mint, we rank and review comics from best to worst. That's Mint, Near Mint, good, fair, and poor to you newbies, and try to guide you on what to read and what might be better to avoid. Hey, guess what? We are now on episode 10, maybe?
Yes.
10, I think-ish?
It's
Powers of X number 5.
A pox on both your houses.
That's the one. Wait, no, that's going to blow my mind through. You can't say a pox, P-O-X, and then house. I'm never going to get the name of this book. My head is... Anyways, we're reading Hickman's Power of X number 5. If you have been reading along and listening along with us, you know that, wow, the X-Men have been going on a wild ride through time and space. That's actually accurate.
Yeah.
Time and space. Powers of X has always been the bigger book to me, as in terms of scale.
Yeah.
We're going to be spoiling Powers of X number 5 and everything that came before. But in terms of scale, because we've gone through so many different epochs, we're going through like the founding era of the X-Men, the time in Krakoa, and the time right as Nimrod is destroying the last of the mutants, and finally 1,000 years later in the far future where something is happening, maybe?
Yep, we've got X to the 0, X to the 1, X to the 2, and X to the 3.
Right.
And X to the 2 is gone now. Yeah,
we do not have anything, at least in this issue, there was no X to the 2. So nothing about that moment where Nimrod comes in full range of its powers, gets rid of all the last of the mutants, we presume, and Moira is killed to give us information about when Nimrod first becomes.
Yeah, in theory, we wrapped that up.
Yeah, it makes sense to a certain extent.
Assuming that these timelines end when Moira dies, which we don't know.
We don't really know that. So in this story, we effectively get the backstory of how Professor X and Magneto recruit both Emma Frost and Forge to help build Cerebro, which was a big thing in the last few issues. Mm-hmm. Cerebro was effectively like a major... Cerebro and the Resurrection Machine, which is not quite a machine. It's a bunch of mutants who have the ability to resurrect other mutants when they work together.
Although it does bring up again the concept of a biological machine.
Yeah, that is...
Which is brought up in discussing Cerebro and what Forge is capable of creating now.
Right. So this Powers of X issue is kind of a deep dive into the how-tos, the sci-fi how-tos of how this whole thing is supposed to work. The mechanics behind how making X-Men effectively immortal is supposed to work, which was something I criticized last issue.
Yeah, that was the first part.
Yeah, that's maybe 50% of this issue.
Yeah, I'd say there's like 3 parts to this issue.
Oh, yeah?
This issue.
There's that?
And it's actually divided pretty evenly between the X to the 0 timeline with Forge, with Professor X outlining his plan for Cerebro with Forge. Mm-hmm. Then in the X to the 1...
With Emma Frost.
And
the governing of Krakoa and how they're going to leverage the pressure on humanity to make them comply.
And then we move to X to the third, the 1,000 years in the future.
Which is about what?
Yeah, that's kind of my thing. We'll get back to that.
All right. So the portion of the story that involves Krakoa, a lot of it is some background on how this machine of resurrection works, which is a lot of the questions I had in the last few issues of this podcast, where I felt like it wasn't quite complete. It seemed arbitrary, almost childlike in how I make backups of people's personalities in computers, and whenever I need to, I bring them back.
Yeah. I gotta say, this answered a lot of questions, but not necessarily any questions I'd needed answered.
Yeah.
This was mostly, well, this is how we get the unlimited power that we need to do it.
Yeah, at no point did I really question the powering of this thing or even where you kept that much data. I may have. This is where I would cut in a part of the podcast where I was like, how can you store that much data? That wasn't as much of my concern as the way it was presented. And you look at this very issue, if you look at this book and the way X to the 3rd presents the Phalanx and how advanced civilizations work and how those things, that feels weirdly it's that weird sci-fi.
Yeah.
That sci-fi that's almost hard to pin down. It feels accurate, but you don't really know what's going on. It's like Dune sci-fi, if you've ever read Dune, where you read Dune and you're like, I believe this is a world or a universe out there. I don't really know how it works, but from the context, I could pull out that there is some sort of there's a law to this place. Whereas using Cerebro to back up mutants still feels very arbitrary. It just feels like it's like, oh, trust me, it works. Don't worry about it. And even the notes in the interstitial are marginally better than they were, in my opinion, than the last issue. But they're still like, who's writing these notes? Why are they so informal at times? Why is, Krakoa tech a thing that's being referred to? Why is there a third note that says Charles Xavier has done this twice? Like such a humble brag if this is Charles's notes.
Yeah.
The note is like it is possible for a telepathic operator to replace their own mind with a previous quote bracket legacy version, but doing so is incredibly difficult and would most likely require a skilled and experienced operator. Charles Xavier has done this twice. It's like it feels like it's goofy. It just feels weird, right?
I wonder if it's supposed to be someone writing the initial notes and then someone else going in and adding further notations.
Like an editor 1, editor 2, editor 3, maybe.
I'm also wondering if it's a sign of some sort of dissociation that Xavier has after doing it a couple of times.
You brought that up or something similar to that in the past. I think it's wishful thinking. I feel like this is a very tight, well-written story, and eventually some things are going to just be not as well-written as others.
Yeah. That's called Hickman.
Well, the parts that are great are amazing, and it drives me crazy that it's like the next page where every character speaking has their own voice so distinct and so them that I'm like, yeah, this is perfect. This is so good. And this is, Emma being recruited as the face to the basically the narcotic division of this country that they're trying to form. The story is interesting. It definitely tries to answer some questions that, again, I don't know if anybody really had about how the Cerebro and the Resurrection Machine work. It probably introduces a few more question marks, like how Krakoa government is supposed to work, and especially that note I just read, right? All the bringing back a legacy version of your mind in your new body. Like, what does that even mean? What does Xavier having done that twice mean?
Like a why?
Yeah. So Xavier's walking now. He isn't walking in X1. So at some point he's like, you know what? If I could have any body I want, let me have a body that isn't crippled. So let me do that. And at some point, did he also decide that he's going to put an older version of his mind into a younger version of his body? Why would he do that?
Yeah.
How? If he's the one doing it, how does he put his mind... I guess he decides, he takes a backup of him. He's like, all right, this is a young Xavier. This is Xavier from 2 weeks ago, we'll say, or a year ago. I'm going to put him in the clone body that's being brewed in one of Golden Balls, who we did not bring up at all.
Gold balls, man.
Gold balls. But anyways, put it in one of his eggs. And then afterwards, I'm going to take myself out and shoot myself. What happens to Xavier after that?
It's like, is there some sort of body BIOS that operates independently from the operating system?
These are the questions that I also do not need answered. We're good.
That is one of my things I feel like is going on with at least the first two parts of this issue. I feel like this is a very complicated... Hickman created a very complicated way that all of this works.
Right.
Which is very theoretically interesting, I guess. Yeah. Especially to world builders.
Yeah.
But he's so enamored with the world he's built that he's feeling the need to explain it all.
Yeah.
In lieu of a narrative.
Yeah.
Almost.
Yeah, it feels like that's what maybe another thing I'm picking up on in these interstitials, these little text pages. if you're trying to deliver plot in them, I'm less excited than if it, like in previous issues where it just felt like it was just a little bit of world building, a little bit of the illusion of something out there that's bigger than the story itself. It's interesting. I'll tell you this: I'm intrigued about what the council for Krakoa is, and I'm looking at how many more issues we have left.
I'm actually a little bit upset about this Council of Krakoa, the Council of 12, or the Quiet Council of Krakoa. That's it.
Well, it's so comedy K's in there.
We're in the next to the last issue of this book. Mm. You're down to 2 more issues left, and you introduce a new mystery.
Yeah,
it's like, okay, I get it's a forever trope of the X-Men, at least, probably a lot of storytelling, to introduce that like a new question at the end of your story.
Right. Yeah.
This isn't the end of the story yet.
Yeah, I'm interested. I'm a little alarmed that this won't be addressed significantly in the story we've got. And I have to wonder, is this just the denouncement after this? Do we have 2 issues of just like, no, the climax was that X-Men are now immortal and they stopped Nimrod.
The story.
It might be. That would be I think that would be
very
disappointing. Yeah. It does not feel complete in that way.
I will say that based on the preview images for the next 2 stories, it does look like we're going to be getting more plot.
Okay, good. Yeah.
It looks like stuff goes south. Yeah,
and I don't want to pre-review things that haven't come out. There's so far this story, these books have not disappointed. So I feel a little neckbeardy to be complaining about something that hasn't happened yet. So let's talk about what has happened in this book. The next big part. Do we actually want to talk about the big section of the story? Or do we actually want to give some time to Namor, the sassiest ruler in all of the 7 seas?
Real quick, I'm going to defend you a little bit.
Okay.
Because I think that the things that we've been discussing are based on legitimate concerns, based on the structure of the narrative so far, and the amount of story of time that we have to wrap up.
Yeah.
There's only so many pages that Hickman's got to use.
I feel like there have been movies in the past where I've looked at the time of like, what's going on? Yeah. Or definitely television series where you're like, you're gonna wrap this all up, right? Yeah. You've only got a few minutes. Come on.
It's like I feel like we're rushing towards a really big to be continued, which should not happen in a series like this.
So there is a potential ending for this series that I think will be maybe a half step towards disappointing, but not complete. And that would be we get a little bit more denouncement of what's happening, what has already happened, and then maybe like a sinister pause on Professor X saying, "But I'm really Cassandra Nova" or something like that, which. The way I just described it is terrible, but again, I have too much predicting what will happen.
Hey, it's a real interesting thing when you plug in the splash page for this. The quote from Professor X, which said, "They will think we are doing one thing, but the truth is we are doing something altogether different."
Oh God, that's good. I hope so. I hope so. This is good. But all right, so let's continue on. Let's
brought up
talk about Namor. Let's talk about Namor. Love it. I really did. I really enjoyed Namor. First of all, he's always hard to place within the X-Men.
Yeah. It's Marvel has this is he, isn't he relationship with him being a mutant to begin with.
Which I'm not even 100% on, other than like he's one of their oldest characters, and at some point he was referred to as a mutant very early on, before the concept really took hold, and the X-Men even took hold. So,
the logic is that he's got ankle wings and nobody else in Atlantis does.
Sure, but there are plenty of characters that have got things that nobody else has, and they're not all mutants.
But he was born with them. So that makes him a mutant.
I wonder if that's true. I feel like there are some characters... that is true. But I wonder if there are some characters that are born different that aren't considered mutants.
Theoretically, it's possible. There's or there has been in the past what's identified as the specific X gene,
Right.
which is what determines whether or not you're actually a mutant.
And we're I guess at some point the Submariner had the X
And
gene.
yeah,
brought up in
we've
that.
determined that yes, he does in fact have the X gene.
Yeah, and there's, I mean, X-Men history is full of characters that are like this, where it's like, oh, you're a Kree mutant, or something like that, where you're like, oh, I didn't realize. Like, I get mutant.
Does that count?
Mutant is kind of more of a generic term, but it also is sometimes used with the capital M. What's happening here? Regardless, he is approached by Professor X in this and gives his basically, thank you for finally seeing the light, and come back when you're serious about it.
Yeah. And it's hard to argue with a guy that makes that pronouncement sitting on a Cthulhu throne.
Yep.
I mean, what was that?
That's how I make all my announcements, sitting on the Cthulhu throne. I'm glad he got like 2 pages of story, if that. Actually, I think maybe one.
It's
one.
2 pages of story presented on one page.
Yeah, and he leaves a mark. I think it's interesting. I think, if anything, this stands for a lot of the questionable mutants that people aren't really sure about, maybe who haven't gotten any FaceTime in this series so far. Always fun to see a classic character being brought out for these reasons. It was also fun to see Forge. I think we skipped over. Emma Frost has been in the book before.
Yeah.
So, she's great. She was been well presented in this.
Forge has barely been in it. I think he's been in the background and he's been mentioned as being instrumental in creating some of the systems that are going on. But he hasn't really, he himself hasn't been a big part of anything.
Right.
And it's interesting to see his personality coming out. They actually, I think they nailed Forge's personality pretty well.
Yeah, I think they did a good job with that. All right, so let's move on to X3.
Before we do that, just real quick, as Xavier's going on that little recruitment drive, that psychic recruitment drive.
Oh yeah, let's go through some of the best ofs.
What is Sinister doing?
He looks like he's stowing a bunch of vials of blood, we assume.
Yeah.
And possibly standing
and
on
there's
several...
a pile of dead Sinisters.
Is that what that is? It's possible.
There's several Sinisters who are not conscious.
Man,
knowing him, I would assume that they're dead.
I really, I'm mixed about Sinister in many ways, but I do enjoy his presence in this book.
Oh yeah,
it's been fun. And then there's Omega Supreme and
Omega Red.
What did I call him? Omega
Supreme.
There is a Transformer in the background,
I liked seeing Exodus.
Okay,
there.
yeah. An interesting group of people who are being recruited in to Krakoa.
Yes.
All right, let's go to the elephant in the room. X3, year 1000. So when we last left them, I don't even remember what book this was. It could have been The Last Powers of X. It may have been before that. There was the Phalanx. The Phalanx was summoned by whatever the, I guess,
entities
the future
inhabiting Earth.
Yeah, the people who are they look like they're techno. They're organic to some degree, but they have a very symbiotic relationship with their machines. And apparently, at this point, they've already made a planet mind.
Do they appear to have blue skin, or is that my color blindness?
Some of them do. The character that's speaking the most, the librarian who is speaking with Nimrod, the little floating Nimrod throughout, does seem to have blue skin. But the elder who is absorbed by Phalanx in the very beginning seems to just have like this yellowish skin, unless that's just the coloration has changed in the book. I don't think so. So it feels as if that at some point in the future, Earth makes a world mind, I think is the term for it, or a technarch or something. Basically, I think it's technarch and then becomes a world mind. We've managed to connect all our consciousness together into we're using every last ounce of energy from our planet. We've, I think, absorbed almost every last ounce of energy from our solar system. Like with a Dyson sphere of some kind.
I'm not sure that we've absorbed it, but we're putting it to use.
Yeah.
That's the...
Yeah. And then at this point, we apparently reached out to the stars and asked the Phalanx to allow us to join their galactic collective. Big deal, right? And in this, we look at our future selves getting dissolved by the Phalanx, I guess.
Yeah, the Phalanx apparently consume those that they accept.
Right. I guess, sure. And I think in this particular situation, we were accepted within the Phalanx, but we weren't like given higher order powers, or we're consumed. Our intellect, humanity,
Yeah.
Earthlings' intellect will stay forever within the Phalanx, but our bodies and our planet will be absorbed, or no more living things will be there.
Yeah.
That's the climax that Nimrod
It says is happening.
it says he believes is happening. And then we get a lot of text describing types of universal society. So we have gotten more details in this last few pages than we have gotten yet about what happens in the year or in X3, 1,000 years in the future. I still don't know at all how this connects to anything.
Is exactly what I was about to say. It's like I don't understand the connection. Why I understand that this is theoretically the future of the world we've been of the story that we're watching, but I don't understand why they're being presented together.
Right.
It's like you would think that in a narrative like this there would be a connection.
The only connection that we see, the only clear connection is Nimrod.
Yeah.
Nimrod's still there, and it's apparently completely under tow. It was like a helpful little Nimrod.
Yeah.
There's arguments about what the level between machine and biology.
Good point.
There's some of that.
I think this is one of the clearest examples that we've seen that whatever the librarian is and the elder, they're not pure machine.
Yes.
Definitely. Because Nimrod refers to itself as being different from them.
Right. And then other than that, the last time we talked about a world mine, it was tied in again with Nimrod.
Mm-hmm.
Phalanx is, of course, an X-Men thing.
Yeah.
The techno-organic virus is part of that long-standing X-Men space aspect. It just doesn't feel to directly tie in with anything, which I feel like maybe us being a little bit obtuse, because clearly at some point, Professor X in the X0, X1 timelines, whatever, is building a machine that allows minds to live on forever in some form, and making bodies becomes part of a machine as well. So maybe that's it. Maybe this is all just a advanced sci-fi story Hickman is telling about when we eventually become transhuman, when we live past the physical constraints of our bodies and we and our machines become one, which is interesting, but way out there.
Yeah.
And doesn't feel like an X-Men story.
Kinda. I mean, I kind of get the X-Men tie-ins. You've got the themes of what it means to be human, quote unquote. You know, who still counts.
Right.
Who has where do human rights go? Mm-hmm. You know, to whom does that apply? Those questions, I don't think those questions are being very well addressed in the X to the third timeline.
I think partially because the reason why I feel, there's two reasons why I don't feel like this is much of an X-Men story in that X to the third timeline. One is so few X-Men characters are there, right? No time-displaced people, nothing. It's just, it exists completely. Nimrod is the only name we know.
Yeah.
The other part is that there's no resistance either, right? So far, the Phalanx is the closest we've gotten to an antagonist, and it's arguable whether they're even antagonists in this situation. So we can ask questions about where does this all go and where does human rights land, but without without humanity pushing against it, it's sort of, it's hard to figure out what we're supposed to learn from this other than here's a possible future. Is it good or bad?
Let's explore the end game of humanity.
Right.
But to what end?
Well, to the end of our review and our ranking for this book. Powers of X number 5. All right. Do you want to go first, or shall I?
I'll take the shot at it. I have a lot of questions about whether or not this is going to wrap up in 2 issues.
Mm-hmm.
I have a lot of problems with, how quickly we're advancing things, and if we're answering questions that need to be answered. But all in all, I think it was a very what we did get presented with was fascinating.
Right.
Regardless of how it serves to progress the actual plot of the books. So I'm actually going to give it a near mint.
All right. Very good.
Yeah, I enjoyed it's almost entirely because I enjoyed reading it.
I also thought this was pretty enjoyable. I thought it was a very good read, a good story so far. But we're 2 issues away from the end, and I want things that always feel like they're driving the story forward. And honestly, I don't feel the first 2/3 of the book really did. They provided a little extra, flourish and stuff. They're interesting. They didn't really give me anything new that I didn't know already to some degree. On the last part that brings up the question of what the Phalanx are doing really doesn't answer anything to me. I'm as clueless as I was before. So I'm only going to give it a good. It was good, but only good. 2 more issues. I hope you're going to stick with it with us. We're excited to see this wrap up and to have probably a super long final episode where we're going to discuss every bit of this.
And please don't be confused by the fact that we gave this book 2 different ratings for apparently about the same reasons.
Yeah, no, this has been happening throughout this entire... I can't wait to give the entire run a rating at the very end, because there's so many times...
Interesting to say.
It's all over the place. But thank you all for listening. If you enjoyed this episode of Near Mint, please like, follow, and subscribe so you get the latest in the podcatcher of your choice. Oh, and leave us a good review so more people find out about the show. Thank you, and we'll be here for you next week. House of X number 6.
6, the final House of X.
This has been a non-productive media presentation. Executive producer Frank Hablawi. This program and many others like it on the Non-Productive Network is distributed under a Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial No Derivatives license. Please share it, but ask before trying to change it or sell it. For more information, visit non-productive.com.